Hello, this is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio. This is Dylan Miller on Daily Dose of Dylan. Alright, so we got some good topics today. A lot of NFL, a little bit of basketball, very little. Alright. So Trey Lance was traded to the Cowboys for simply just a fourth-round pick. And as I've said the last few weeks, the Trey Lance experiment just simply didn't work. You know, it's not a big deal. The Niners have their guy. It's not like they completely struck out here. You know, they have Brock Purdy, who they went undefeated with when he finished the game. You know, and the Niners are like just one team that doesn't really, the way Shanahan runs it, they don't really need they don't really need a Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady or franchise level guy. Like they made it to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo through I think that year he threw 27 touchdowns, 13 picks. And they were pretty close to winning that Super Bowl as well. They were leading heading into the fourth quarter before giving it away, but they got pretty close to winning that with Jimmy Garoppolo. So they don't really need their quarterbacks to be crazy talented. You know, they're not in high demand for that kind of thing. All right. So for the first time since 2018, Aaron Rodgers debuted in the preseason. Obviously, he did very well in his time there because he's against backups, so hopefully he would. Threw a touchdown to Garrett Wilson. And, I feel like he had to play at least one preseason game. He is in a new system, which he really hasn't had to deal with since, 2008, so. You know, the Jets, I haven't really changed my mind on them much. I mean, I don't think what I'm saying is completely crazy. I think it's pretty much with what everyone else is thinking. Aaron Rodgers and Dalvin Cook are going to help. They'll be significantly better than last year. Unfortunately, in a stacked AFC, I don't see them contending for a Super Bowl. You know, I think they can win a playoff game. I do. I think they can get to the wild card and possibly be looking at the second rounds. But, you know, I'm going to dive into this later. It's just their schedule is tough to start out. Like, if you look at the first few weeks of their schedule, it's Eagles, Chiefs, obviously the Bills, they have to play twice. The Patriots, when you look at the two rosters, the Patriots and the Jets, obviously the Jets are significantly better on paper, but it's hard to ignore the fact that the Patriots have won, I think, 14 straight times against the Jets, so it's hard to, ignore that, but I'm not going to include them as a list of tough teams they face. But yeah, so the Bills twice, Chiefs, Eagles. They have their work cut out for them. So, all right. So Matthew Stafford's wife on her podcast said Stafford is struggling connecting with the younger receivers on the Rams, and this honestly was pretty evident last year. I mean, there was a lot of excuse about the elbow injury, which I'm sure played a factor, but I do think a lot of their downfall last year was the fact that they just didn't have the same chemistry. And, obviously he has Cooper Kupp, but that connection can only take them so far. And it's hard for me to pinpoint what exactly went wrong, because I don't know how you go from a Super Bowl champion to 5-12. So, honestly, I'm not even sure if this was a conversation that they had that was supposed to be made public. But, I don't know. That's their problem to handle. But, yeah, so the Rams, I have no idea what happens. And over the past few weeks, I have tried to talk myself into the fact that the Rams can get 7 or 8 wins, but I don't know if they can. I'm now leaning towards the fact that it might be possible they do even worse than last year. Like, I'm saying maybe 6-11 for them, maybe 7-10. I don't know, but they don't look good. All right, so John Stockton was talking about the influence LeBron has over certain roster decisions. He said it would be annoying if he were a teammate, and well, I do agree with that. This is how the modern NBA works. I mean, when you think about it, no other league has a player that has this kind of power. Like, no other league, like the NFL and the MLB, they don't really have any player that can really have a say in the roster decisions the team makes. And it can be very annoying as a younger player on the team because you're probably like talking to LeBron. You're like, well, I can't say anything bad to this guy. He'll probably want to trade me. But this, unfortunately, is how the modern NBA is structured. Certain players have a certain amount of power over even the GMs, which is why I think the NBA is starting to kind of. It's why the NBA isn't as exciting anymore, especially with all the mobility, all the players. How can you be a fan of a team when you're only going to have the same roster for like 5 games? But, yeah. All right, so the Jets. I think I pointed this out on Friday. There's a lot of topics that there's a lot of NFL teams I've talked about a lot over the past few weeks, like specifically, the Cowboys, the Jets. I've probably talked about the Cowboys and Jets more than I've talked about the Packers. Lucky for you guys, I do not mention the Packers in this podcast. I'm not going to talk about them, but I will talk about the Jets. So, I think over the course of the summer, I was kind of bouncing from like positive to negative about the Jets. On Friday, obviously, I said something about how, it seems like they're gaining issues with their offense, but, there are a lot of positives for the Jets. So the Rodgers-Wilson connection seems to be solid. Now, I don't think it can be. I mean, we'll see how far they can take it. I don't know if they'll be like Rodgers and Nelson. They definitely won't be Rodgers and Adams, but I think they could be a solid quarterback-receiver duo. As you guys know, I did my top 10 quarterback-receiver duos, and I had Rodgers and Wilson at 10, just because I can't put them any higher if they haven't played before. So, I can't put them over Burrow and Chase or Kirk and Justin Jefferson if they haven't played a game together before. But yeah, so the Rodgers-Wilson connection, Rodgers seems to be in pretty good shape. Better than he was last year. Mekhi Becton is back in the lineup. Elijah Vera-Tucker seems to be very promising. So there are positives. Obviously, and their defense is probably top 5, and actually definitely top 5 in the league. So yeah, there's a lot of positives with them. And I'm not saying they're going to be a bad team. I just think in a stacked AFC, I think 10-7, 11-6 is realistic with them. And potentially second in the division. There is also a possibility that 3 teams from the AFC East make the playoffs, which is what I believe will happen. But yeah, so there's a lot of positives, a lot to be excited about. But there is also the worry, and I hate to say this again, but about the O-line. Outside of Vera Tucker, there's not really another old lineman that's solid, Like Becton, he seems to be healthy again, but he's had a lot of problems over the last 2-3 seasons, so we'll see how he fares. But, and their receiving core has taken a few hits. I mean, Garrett Wilson's great. But then who do you have? McCole Hardman's more of a 3 guy. Allen Lazard's injured. Corey Davis just retired. So the receiving core kind of just took a hit with Davis retiring. So the positives outweigh the negatives with the Jets, obviously. But I'm just saying, you can't ignore the fact that their O-line is shaky. I think Buffalo is the favorite to win the division. Yet again. And I think depending on how the O-line performs this year, the Jets, they can range from 8 to 12 wins, depending on how the O-line performs this year. My educated guess is they win 10 or 11. That's my prediction. And until something crazy happens, I'm going to stick with it. But, so the Rodgers-Wilson connection, I think that could be really good. It kind of reminds me of when Peyton Manning went to the Broncos. He was already a proven veteran, already won a Super Bowl. And he made Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders significantly better. So Demaryius Thomas and Sanders were already... They were already promising, but they weren't Pro Bowl level until Peyton Manning got there. I think Rodgers can have a similar effect on Garrett Wilson. Yeah. So, I mean, it's hard to... Like, I haven't made a playoff prediction this year because I don't know what to do with the AFC. With the NFC, I made it pretty clear. I think it's the Niners, Eagles, and then everybody else. The only teams in the NFC that I see competing for a Super Bowl are the Niners and Eagles, but the AFC, there's a lot of promising teams. Obviously, you got the Bengals, Chiefs, Bills. Those are probably your three best teams. But then you got the Dolphins look good, the Jets look good, the Steelers look good, the Ravens look good if they don't get injured again. The Steelers look promising. The Chargers as well. The Chargers are another team. And I really like the Jags this year. I think the Jags can win a playoff game. I don't see them going to the AFC Championship, but I do see them going to the second round and showing a lot of promise. Being a very high-scoring offense. And there are some people that are excited about the Broncos. I don't see the Broncos doing that much this year. Like I said, I think they're going to be better than last year, but not great. Anyway, so who I wanted to talk about was the Steelers. So Kenny Pickett had a very solid preseason. And like I said, I don't want to get too hung up on how they performed in the preseason because if they're supposed to be your starting quarterback, you hope they perform well. Like, Jordan Love looked pretty good, and that gives me hope as a Packers fan, but, of course you hope he can do well against backups. He's going to play starters. So Kenny Pickett had a very good preseason. And honestly, last year, I don't know how, Mike Tomlin managed to win 9 games with that team. And as I said, I don't know what to do with the AFC. I went over who I think will make the playoffs. I did not include the Steelers. But that's just because I don't think they're better than the Ravens, in my opinion. I don't think the Steelers are better than the Ravens or Jets. That's why I don't think they make the playoffs. The Ravens, Jets, or Dolphins, obviously. So the reason I don't have them as one of the 7 AFC playoff teams is because well, they're not going to win their division. They're not going to beat the Bengals. And for the 3 other spots, I think the Dolphins, Jets, and Ravens are better. And, it's hard to... It's hard to pinpoint where they're going to land. They have a... And like I said, again, it's hard to find anything to dislike about the Steelers. They have a very good receiver, George Pickens. They have Najee Harris. They have a great defense. Very good head coach, Mike Tomlin. And it all relies on how Kenny Pickett does this year. If Kenny Pickett is solid, there is serious consideration for them beating out the Ravens for second place in that division. So we'll see how it all turns out, but like I said, the overall point is the AFC, it's hard to predict what's going to happen this year. All right. So, Giannis talked about his contract extension. He said he was looking for a stronger title commitment from the Bucks before signing another extension. Honestly, I think Giannis is a very reasonable player. I do think he is. I think he's a top 3 player currently right now. Honestly, if I'm being honest, I didn't follow the NBA too much this year. The crazy thing is I love basketball, but it's like the NBA is kind of starting to lose my interest a bit. But I do think the Bucks can contend for a championship this year, and I hope Giannis can win more because, you hate to see... obviously Giannis got his ring already, but, it's like with Drew Brees in the NFL. Great player, but that one ring leaves a lot to be desired. So, you hate to see a player of Giannis' caliber only get out of the league with one ring. So, all right, the last... thing I want to talk about today is, so the Texans announced their starter, CJ Stroud. Yay. I'm not sure why this was news, to be honest with you, because I don't know who else would have been the starter. CJ Stroud we'll see how he does. I will say, the last time I predicted a quarterback bust, it looks like I was right. I said it was I think 2 years ago, 2 drafts ago I should say. I said if there was going to be a bust, it would be Mac Jones. And that is because at colleges like Ohio State and Alabama, it's a fantasy land for quarterbacks. You get great receivers, great O-line, great weapons overall, great defense, great coaching. You have everything cut out for you. In the NFL, you rarely have. That's rare in the NFL. Even Patrick Mahomes doesn't have a great running back, the Chiefs. They can have a bit of a better O-line. Their defense, they don't have the best defense in the NFL, but... yeah, so if I'm going to pick a quarterback that's going to be a bust out of this draft class, I'm going to say CJ Stroud. Coming out of Ohio State, and obviously he's going from Ohio State to... imagine going from a team that is as well-structured as Ohio State to the Texans. That's pretty rough. I don't know how he's going to adapt to that, but... CJ Stroud's success is not going to be measured by how much he wins. It's probably going to be more about his, stats. Because with Justin Herbert, his first year, obviously, the Chargers were a bad team his first year. But what was impressive was the fact that he threw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. That's what people cared about. They didn't care that he missed the playoffs. So if he finishes last in his division, which he probably will, realistically, but he has a solid stat line, I don't think people will care that much. So, I don't know. Alright. So, that's going to be it for today. This is Dylan Milan, Dylan. I'm going to, like I said, just keep trying to upload podcasts as much as I can, whenever I get the time. Obviously, school for me is starting soon, so usually when that happens, I have very little time to get podcasts in. But I'll give my best effort. So, alright. Still Milan Stone, Google Podcast, Spotify, Spreaker, or iHeartRadio. Still Milan Stone. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.